Welcome to the Behind Closed Doors channel. Wishing you a peaceful day. Today, I'd like to share the following story with you. I hope you enjoy listening to my story. Now, please.
She sued her own mother after 20 years of silence. The entire courtroom went dead quiet when they heard why. Part 1. The opening shot. The day Maya Chen walked into courtroom 14 of Riverside County Superior Court wearing her mother's favorite color, a deep, bruised violet, nobody in the gallery understood why. They would, eventually, but by then, most of them would be too busy trying not to cry to ask. Maya was 34 years old, a structural engineer who spent her days calculating how much weight a bridge could bear before it broke. She wore her dark hair pulled back so tight it looked like a decision. Her hands, resting on the plaintiff's table, were completely still, the hands of someone who had rehearsed this moment 10,000 times in the bathroom mirror of a studio apartment she'd rented specifically because it had no room for a second person. The defendant sat 12 feet away. Her name was Linda Chen, née Linda Yao, 61 years old, wearing a pale blue cardigan that had lost a button somewhere between the car parking and the courthouse steps. She looked like someone's grandmother. She was someone's grandmother, actually. She babysat the neighbors' kids on Tuesdays and made hand-pulled noodles from scratch and kept a photo of the Dalai Lama above her kitchen sink because she found his face calming. She also looked like she hadn't slept in 3 weeks, which was accurate. Between them sat 20 years of silence so thick you could have sold it by the yard. The clerk called the room to order. Judge Patricia Holloway, a compact woman in her mid-50s, whose reading glasses were perched at the absolute tip of her nose as if they were considering jumping, reviewed the case file one more time and allowed herself the briefest possible frown. Chen versus Chen. Mother versus daughter. A civil suit for the recovery of assets, the violation of a trust agreement, and what the filing documents called, in language so clipped it was practically bleeding, the deliberate and sustained destruction of the plaintiff's life opportunities. In the gallery, a court reporter named Denny Vasquez, who had been covering family court cases for 11 years and thought he'd seen everything twice, leaned over to his colleague and whispered, "What's the story here?" His colleague, a woman named Fran, who always brought exactly 4 oatmeal raisin cookies to work and ate them at precisely timed intervals throughout the day, whispered back, "Mother stole from her kid, apparently." Denny looked at Linda Chen, at her missing button, her tired eyes, her hands folded so carefully in her lap they looked like origami. "She doesn't look like a thief," he said. Fran ate a cookie. "They never do." She was right, of course. Linda Chen did not look like a thief. But then, the most devastating heists in history are rarely performed by people who look the part. They are performed by people you love. People who tuck you in at night and cut the crusts off your sandwiches and sit beside your hospital bed, holding your hand when you're small and frightened and the world feels too large and too sharp and too cold. People who know exactly where you keep your dreams, because they were there when you first started dreaming them. Maya Chen had started dreaming at age 6.
That was when she picked up a pencil and drew a bridge. Not a child's bridge, not a scribbled arc over a squiggle of water, a real bridge with towers and cables and careful attention to how the weight would distribute across the span. Her kindergarten teacher, a round-faced woman named Mrs. Patrice, who smelled permanently of chalk dust and lavender, had taped it to the wall of the classroom and told Maya's parents at the next conference, "Your daughter has a gift." Linda Chen had beamed so wide that day that her face looked like it might split in half. David Chen, Maya's father, a quiet man who repaired watches for a living and had the steadiest hands in any room he entered, had squeezed his wife's hand and said, "Of course she does. She's ours." They were happy then, or something close enough to it that the difference didn't matter. Maya grew up in a 2-story house on Peachtree Lane in a suburb of Sacramento, California, where the streets were named after fruit and the neighbors waved at each other, and the summers were so hot the asphalt bubbled. She was a serious child, not unhappy, just focused in a way that adults paused. While other kids played tag at recess, Maya redesigned the school playground in her notebook, calculating the optimal angle for the slide to maximize speed without danger. Her teachers called her gifted. Her classmates called her weird, which she accepted as a synonym. Her mother called her my treasure, which Maya carried around inside her chest like a warm stone. David Chen died of a cardiac event when Maya was 12. He was 43 years old and had just finished servicing a 1947 Longines pocket watch that belonged to a retired school teacher named Harold Mintz, and he set it down gently on the felt pad and stood up from his workbench and sat back down again, and then he was gone. Just like that. The steady hands went still. Maya remembered the exact moment she was told. She had been drawing bridge designs at the kitchen table, a glass of orange juice beside her left hand, and her mother had come in from the hallway, and she had known just from the way Linda Chen moved that the world had changed shape. Linda sat down across from her daughter and took both her hands and said, "Daddy isn't coming home." And Maya had looked down at her drawings and thought, with the strange clarity that children sometimes gives, "I have to finish these. He would have wanted me to finish these." She was right. David Chen had been Maya's first and most devoted believer. He'd kept every drawing she'd ever made in a cardboard box under his workbench, labeled in his careful watchmaker's handwriting, Maya's Bridges. After he died, Maya took the box to her room and kept it under her bed, and on hard nights she would take out one drawing and look at it and remember that someone thought she was worth saving. She applied to MIT at 17. She got in. Here is where the story begins to fracture. Here is where you need to lean in because the crack is so small at first that you almost miss it. Maya's acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in April. She had come home from school to find it on the kitchen table, a thick envelope, the kind that means yes, and she had ripped it open with shaking hands and read it 3 times and then gone looking for her mother. Linda Chen was in the garden, kneeling in the dirt between the tomato plants she grew every summer, her hands dark with soil. Maya read the letter out loud, standing in the doorway, her voice only slightly unsteady. When she finished, Linda Chen looked up from the garden. Her face did something complicated that Maya was too young and too excited to read correctly. "MIT," Linda said. "MIT," Maya confirmed. There was a long pause. "That's in Boston," her mother said. "Massachusetts, yeah." Another pause.
The tomato plants trembled slightly in the afternoon breeze. "That's very far away," Linda said, and Maya, 17 and brilliant and completely unprepared for what was coming, said, "I know, isn't it amazing?" The scholarship came through in June. Maya Chen had been awarded the David and Lucille Packard Academic Excellence Scholarship, full tuition, room and board for 4 years, renewable based on academic standing. It was one of 12 awarded nationwide that year. The program director called the house personally to congratulate her and spoke to Linda Chen for several minutes while Maya sat on the stairs outside the kitchen, listening to her mother's end of the conversation. Yes, I see. That's very generous. And how does the disbursement work exactly?" Maya had not thought anything of it at the time. She would think about it constantly for the next 20 years. The summer before college, Maya worked at a hardware store in Sacramento, stocking shelves and answering questions about grout, and she saved every dollar she made, and she was happy in the uncomplicated way that people are happy when they can see the whole shape of their future spread out in front of them. She and her mother moved carefully around each other that summer, not coldly, but with a kind of delicate caution, as if they were both aware that something had shifted, but neither was willing to name it. Linda Chen made hand-pulled noodles every Sunday and insisted Maya eat 3 bowls, and Maya did, because the noodles were extraordinary, and because she was 18 and could eat 3 bowls of anything and feel fine. They went to the movies twice. They did not discuss Boston. On the night before Maya left, Linda Chen came to her room and sat on the edge of the bed and brushed the hair off her daughter's forehead the way she had done when Maya was small and sick with fever. "You're going to do great things," Linda said. Maya believed her completely. This is the saddest part of the story. Not what came after. This moment of perfect, unspoiled belief before everything that followed destroyed it retroactively, reaching back through time like a wrecking ball, turning even the good memories into rubble.
Part 2. The Long Fracture. Maya arrived at MIT in late August with 2 suitcases, a cardboard box of bridge drawings, and a bank account number that her mother had helped her set up that summer. The scholarship funds were to be dispersed quarterly, directly to a designated account, standard procedure the program administrator had explained. The account needed to be a U.S. bank account, and since Maya was a minor at the time of setup, a parent or guardian needed to be listed as a joint account holder. Linda Chen's name was on the account. Maya thought nothing of it. She was 18, eager, naive in the specific way that extremely intelligent young people are naive, deeply sophisticated about abstract things, completely unprepared for the concrete cruelties of the world they actually live in. She moved into her dorm room in Burton and Connor House and met her roommate, a girl from Mumbai named Priya Sharma, who was studying quantum physics and who would become, over the next 4 years, the closest friend Maya had ever had or would have. Priya was small and loud and spectacularly disorganized, a human hurricane of textbooks and opinion and enthusiasm. And she had an ability to laugh at absolutely anything that Maya found first baffling and then essential. "You draw bridges," Priya said, looking at the cardboard box. "I engineer bridges," Maya corrected. "There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "One is art, the other is math. I do both." Priya looked at the drawings for a long time. "These are beautiful," she said, and she meant it. Priya Sharma was constitutionally incapable of saying things she didn't mean, a quality that would occasionally get her into trouble, but mostly made her invaluable.
"My dad used to keep them," Maya said. "He died when I was 12. Priya didn't say, "I'm sorry," the way most people did, reflexively, guiltily, already moving to the next topic. She just nodded once and then said, "He was right to keep them." Maya opened her mouth to say something and then didn't, because there was nothing that needed saying. They ordered pizza that night and ate it on the floor, surrounded by Maya's bridge drawings and Priya's quantum physics textbooks, and Maya thought, "I am going to be okay." She was, for a while. The first sign came at the end of her freshman year. Maya had done spectacularly, a 3.97 GPA, 2 published papers in an undergraduate engineering journal, and a summer internship offer from an infrastructure firm in Boston that paid reasonably well and would give her hands-on experience. She called her mother to share the news, and Linda Chen was warm and proud and asked if Maya was eating enough. Then she checked her bank account. The quarterly scholarship disbursement, $6,200, the portion designated for living expenses and personal costs beyond tuition and room fees, had been deposited and then withdrawn. Not all at once, in pieces, $800 here, $1,200 there, spread across several weeks in a pattern that might have looked, to an inattentive eye, like ordinary student spending. Maya stared at her bank statement for a long time. Then she called her mother. Linda answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm and completely normal and gave absolutely nothing away. "Hi, Treasure, how are you?" "Mum, I'm looking at my bank account." A pause, one beat too long. "Oh?" "There are withdrawals I don't recognize." "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I needed to cover some things at home. The water heater broke, and the car needed new tires, and I was going to pay it back before—" "That was my scholarship money," Maya said. Her voice was very quiet. I know. It was just temporary, Maya. I'll put it back." "How much is left, Mum, in that account? How much is actually left of my money?" The pause this time was longer. "About 1,400 of 6,200. Maya sat on the edge of her dorm room bed and looked at the bridge drawings on her desk and felt something in her chest slowly petrify, not breaking quite, but hardening into something that would take a long time to feel again.
"I needed the money," her mother said softly. "I'm alone here, Maya. Everything costs so much since your father." "Okay," Maya said. "You understand, don't you? You're my daughter. You know I'd never—" "Okay," Maya said again. She hung up. She did not cry. She was, at 19, already learning not to. Here is the part that breaks your heart in a different way. She didn't leave. She didn't report it. She didn't go to the scholarship administrator and explain what was happening. She didn't change the account. She didn't remove her mother's name. She went to Priya's room and sat on Priya's floor and ate crackers from a box and said, "My mum borrowed some money from my scholarship account." Priya, cross-legged on her bed with a quantum mechanics textbook open on her lap, looked at Maya over her reading glasses. "Borrowed? Yes. Does she know she borrowed it?" A beat. "I think so," Maya said. Priya put her book down. This was unusual. Priya almost never put her book down. "Maya, listen to me. You need to change that account. She's going through a hard time. My dad died. Your dad died when you were 12. Maya, she's alone. She took your scholarship money." Maya ate a cracker. She thought about the way her mother had sounded on the phone, the warmth in her voice, the practiced ease of it, the way she'd moved so smoothly from court to explaining to almost making you feel bad for suspecting.
She said she'd pay it back, Maya said. Priya's face did something complicated and kind and resigned all at once. Okay, she said. She picked her book back up. She never brought it up again, which was the right thing to do, because Maya needed to get there herself, and some roads can only be walked by the person who needs to walk them. Linda Chen did not pay it back. Not that semester, not the next one, not ever. What she did instead was continue. Over the next 3 years of Maya's undergraduate education, Linda Chen withdrew through the joint account that Maya kept meaning to change and never quite did, through the particular paralysis that children of complicated parents often develop, through the guilt and the love and the loyalty that get tangled together until you can't pull one thread without unraveling all of them, a total of $31,400. $31,400. Every quarterly disbursement, the living expenses portion that the scholarship designated specifically for the student, was touched. Some quarters it was a few hundred, others it was close to the maximum. Linda always called after. She always had an explanation. The furnace, the roof, the car again, a medical bill, the neighbor's fence that had fallen on her yard during a windstorm, and that, for some reason, was apparently Linda's financial responsibility. Maya listened to each explanation with a face that was learning to stay very still, and said things like, "Okay," and "I understand," and once, memorably, "Mum, the scholarship is for my education," to which Linda had said, "Maya, I raised you, I am your education." And somehow, in the alchemy of guilt and love and complicated grief that governed their relationship, Maya had not hung up the phone. She got a part-time job at an architecture firm. She tutored undergraduates in calculus. She applied for a separate personal account and moved what she could into this and told herself this was solving the problem, which was technically true in the way that putting a single sandbag in front of a flood is solving a problem. She graduated with highest honors. She graduated if she was honest with herself, and she was trying very hard always to be honest with herself, with a grief so layered and so specific that she had no language for it yet. It wasn't anger exactly, though anger was in there. It wasn't betrayal exactly, though that was in there too.
It was something closer to the feeling you get when you look at a bridge you designed and realize that someone has quietly, steadily, deliberately been removing load-bearing elements, and the bridge is still standing, but only just, and you don't know how long it has to go. She moved to Boston after graduation. She did not go back to Sacramento. She called her mother every few weeks. The calls were careful, pleasant, informative, and emotionally hermetic. Reports, essentially, from a life that Linda Chen was no longer permitted to access. Linda sent cards for her birthday and Christmas and called with advice Maya hadn't asked for, and sent packages of dried herbs, and occasionally sent emails that began, "I've been thinking about you so much lately," and ended with references to her own loneliness that was so precisely calibrated to produce guilt that Maya sometimes wondered if her mother had taken a class. They maintained this careful fiction for years. The second fracture happened when Maya was 26. She had been working for 3 years at an infrastructure engineering firm in Boston. Good work, real work, the kind of work where you spend 6 months calculating load tolerances for a highway overpass and stand on a bluff above the river and watch them build it and feel something so large it doesn't have a name. She was making decent money. She had a small apartment in Somerville with a view of absolutely nothing except someone else's fire escape, and she loved it with the passionate intensity of someone who had worked very hard for very modest things. she had been seeing someone, a man named James Kirby, an environmental lawyer with a dry sense of humor and a habit of reading biographies of dead historical figures on Sunday mornings. He was steady in a way Maya found at first boring and then gradually essential. He made excellent coffee. He asked questions and listened to the answers. He did not take anything that wasn't offered. She told him about the scholarship money on their fourth date over ramen in a restaurant in Cambridge where the tables were too close together and they had to lean toward each other to hear. He put down his chopsticks. He said, "How much in total?" She told him. He was quiet for a moment. "And you never reported it?" "She's my mother." "I understand that. I'm asking a practical question. You never reported it?" "No." He picked his chopsticks back up. "Okay," he said. "That's it? What would you like me to say?" Maya thought about it. "I don't know. What do you think?" James Kirby looked at her with the steady, evaluative gaze he usually reserved for legal briefs and said, "I think that you have been told repeatedly by the person who was supposed to protect you most that your needs come second, and I think you've incorporated that message so completely that you're surprised when anyone asks you what you want." Maya stared at him. "The ramen is good," he said, and picked up his bowl. She did not say anything, because there was nothing to say. He was right, with the clarity of someone who could see from the outside what she was too close to see. She thought about that conversation for a long time afterward.
She was thinking about it, in fact, on the night 3 months later when her phone rang, and it was a woman named Susan Park, who was a case manager at the California Department of Adult Services, who had been trying to reach Maya Chen for several days, who had found her number through a record search, who needed to inform Maya that her mother, Linda Chen, had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia and had applied for state-assisted living funding and had listed Maya Chen as her primary contact and emergency financial support person, and had also, and this was the part that made Maya sit down on her kitchen floor, submitted documentation claiming that Maya Chen had agreed to provide $2,000 per month in financial support, signed with what appeared to be Maya's signature. Maya Chen had not signed anything. She had not agreed to anything. She had not been asked. She sat on her kitchen floor for 45 minutes. Then she called James. "I need a lawyer," she said. "I'm a lawyer," he said. "Not you, a different kind." "Okay," he said. "I know someone." She did not sue her mother then. She wants you to understand that. She wants to be clear about the number of times she had the opportunity and the reason and the moral right to do something and chose instead to do nothing. Because she is still, even now, even after everything, her mother's daughter. What she did do was consult with an attorney named Robert Haas, a patient, gray-templed man who specialized in financial elder fraud and asset recovery, who reviewed the documents Maya brought him, bank statements, scholarship records, the forged support agreement, and said, "Miss Chen, what you're describing is theft." "She's my mother," said Maya. Robert Haas looked at her over his glasses in a way that reminded her strangely of Judge Holloway, though she wouldn't make that connection until much later. "I understand that," he said. "It doesn't change the legal facts." "What are my options?" He laid them out methodically. She could pursue a civil claim for recovery of funds, the scholarship money, the forged support agreement, and potentially additional damages. She could file a police report, which could result in criminal charges. Or she could do nothing, which was also an option, though not one he'd recommend. Maya sat with these options for 3 years. 3 years of phone calls with her mother that were civil and careful and completely hollow. 3 years of James Kirby making excellent coffee and asking her questions and waiting with the patience of someone who had decided she was worth waiting for. 3 years of working on bridges, real bridges, actual bridges, a footbridge in Vermont and a highway overpass in Maryland and a pedestrian suspension bridge in Colorado that won a regional engineering award and that Maya stood beside on the day of its opening and felt, for one clear moment, entirely herself. She filed the lawsuit at 34, not because anything new happened, because nothing old was ever going to get better, and she had finally run out of the particular kind of hope that keeps you from doing the necessary thing.
Part 3. The Courtroom.
Judge Patricia Holloway ran her courtroom with the precision of someone who did not believe in wasted time or wasted words. She had been on the bench for 19 years. She had seen contested divorces so vicious they left scorch marks, custody battles so prolonged they spanned the childhoods they were supposedly protecting, inheritance disputes that had turned siblings into enemies across decades. She had a filing system in her brain organized by tragedy, and she knew exactly where most cases fit before the opening statements were finished. Chen versus Chen did not fit anywhere she could immediately locate. She had read the case file 3 times. The facts were clear enough, clearer than most. The bank records were unambiguous. The scholarship documentation was thorough. The forged legal agreement was, according to a handwriting expert retained by the plaintiff, definitively not signed by Maya Chen. $31,400 of scholarship funds misappropriated over 4 years, a forged legal document, $2,000 a month in support payments that a state agency had been led to believe were agreed upon. On paper, it was robbery, the kind of case that moved through civil court with depressing efficiency and resulted in a judgment, a payment plan, and an insurance claim. Except for the look on Maya Chen's face when she sat down at the plaintiff's table. Except for the 20-year gap between the events in question and the filing date, which suggested that this lawsuit was not primarily about the money. Judge Holloway had been on the bench long enough to know that when someone waits 20 years to sue, they are not suing for money. They are suing because the courtroom is the only room left where someone in authority has to listen to the truth. Maya's attorney was a woman named Claire Sato, 41, precise, composed, with a voice that had no audible emotion in it whatsoever, which was either a professional asset or a personal deficiency, depending on who you asked. She had a quality that Maya had noticed during their first meeting and come to rely on. She never filled silences unnecessarily. In a profession full of people in love with their own words, Claire Sato used language like a surgeon uses a scalpel, exactly as much as needed, applied exactly where it would do the most work. She was also, privately, absolutely furious on her client's behalf. This was professional. Attorneys who cannot feel fury at injustice make poor advocates. The trick is never letting the fury make the decisions. She opened the case with 6 minutes of clean, factual narration. Bank records, scholarship documents, transaction histories, the forged signature analyzed by Dr. Richard Fong, forensic document examiner, who would testify that the signature on the support agreement bore 37 points of divergence from Maya Chen's authenticated signature and was, in his expert opinion, fabricated.
Linda Chen's attorney, a man named Gerald Fitch, 60-something, tired in a way that suggested he had taken this case as a favor and was already regretting it, listened to all of this with the expression of someone waiting for a bus that is catastrophically late. He had advised his client to settle. Linda Chen had refused. Linda took the stand on the second day. She was dressed carefully, a grey blazer, pearl earrings, her silver hair pinned at the back. She looked exactly like someone's kind aunt. She looked exactly like what she was, a 61-year-old woman with early-stage dementia, sitting in a witness chair in a courthouse while her daughter sued her for stealing her future. Whatever you feel about that image, and the courtroom felt many things simultaneously, hold it, because the story is not done yet. Gerald Fitch walked her through her testimony with the careful pace of someone navigating a minefield. Yes, she had access to the account. Yes, she had made withdrawals. Yes, she had financial difficulties after her husband's death, unexpected expenses, a house that needed repairs, a job that paid inconsistently. "Did you intend to repay the funds?" Fitch asked. "Yes," Linda said, without hesitation, "always." "Did you explain to your daughter why you needed the money?" "Every time," Linda said. "Maya always understood. She was always so—" She paused, and something moved across her face. Not calculation, not performance, but something that looked genuinely like grief. In the gallery, Denny Vasquez wrote in his notebook, "Defendant appears to believe own testimony." He was a perceptive man. This was in fact the most complicated element of the entire case, the element that had kept Maya awake for 3 years, the element that the law was not really equipped to handle. Linda Chen, to the extent that one could determine, was not lying. She had convinced herself over 20 years that she had needed the money, that Maya had understood, that the withdrawals were not theft but support, a mother's prerogative, a widowed woman's necessity, a reasonable redistribution within a family unit. She had revised the story so many times in the solitary privacy of her own mind that the original version was no longer accessible to her. This is what financial abuse often looks like from the inside. Not a villain, not someone who wakes up and says, "Today I will steal from my child." Someone who needs something and tells themselves a story about why taking it is okay, and keeps telling the story until it becomes the only story they know. Claire Sato's cross-examination was 15 minutes long. She placed a stack of bank statements in front of Linda Chen. She pointed to each withdrawal. She asked for each one, "Were you experiencing financial difficulty at this time?" Linda said yes. "Did you inform your daughter of this withdrawal before making it?" A pause. "I spoke to her about our situation, yes." "Did you inform her before making this specific withdrawal?" Another pause, longer. "I don't recall exactly." "The bank records indicate this withdrawal was made on October 14th. Your phone records show your next call to your daughter was on October 19th, 5 days after the withdrawal. Is that consistent with informing her before?" Gerald Fitch said, "Objection," in a voice that suggested he was objecting out of professional obligation rather than genuine hope. Linda Chen's attorney, a man named Gerald Fitch, 60-something, tired in a way that suggested he had taken this case as a favor and was already regretting it, listened to all of this with the expression of someone waiting for a bus that is catastrophically late. He had advised his client to settle. Linda Chen had refused. Linda took the stand on the second day. She was dressed carefully, a grey blazer, pearl earrings, her silver hair pinned at the back. She looked exactly like someone's kind aunt. She looked exactly like what she was, a 61-year-old woman with early-stage dementia, sitting in a witness chair in a courthouse while her daughter sued her for stealing her future.
Whatever you feel about that image, and the courtroom felt many things simultaneously, hold it, because the story is not done yet. Gerald Fitch walked her through her testimony with the careful pace of someone navigating a minefield. Yes, she had access to the account. Yes, she had made withdrawals. Yes, she had financial difficulties after her husband's death, unexpected expenses, a house that needed repairs, a job that paid inconsistently. "Did you intend to repay the funds?" Fitch asked. "Yes," Linda said, without hesitation, "always." "Did you explain to your daughter why you needed the money?" "Every time," Linda said. "Maya always understood. She was always so—" She paused, and something moved across her face. Not calculation, not performance, but something that looked genuinely like grief. In the gallery, Denny Vasquez wrote in his notebook, "Defendant appears to believe own testimony." He was a perceptive man. This was, in fact, the most complicated element of the entire case, the element that had kept Maya awake for 3 years, the element that had made settlement conferences brutal and exhausting, the element that the law was not really equipped to handle. Linda Chen, to the extent that one could determine, was not lying. She had convinced herself over 20 years that she had needed the money, that Maya had understood, that the withdrawals were not theft, but support, a mother's prerogative, a widowed woman's necessity, a reasonable redistribution within a family unit. She had revised the story so many times in the solitary privacy of her own mind that the original version was no longer accessible to her. This is what financial abuse often looks like from the inside. Not a villain, not someone who wakes up and says, "Today I will steal from my child." Someone who needs something and tells themselves a story about why taking it is okay, and keeps telling the story until it becomes the only story they know. Claire Sato's cross-examination was 15 minutes long. She placed a stack of bank statements in front of Linda Chen. She pointed to each withdrawal. She asked for each one, "Were you experiencing financial difficulty at this time?" Linda said yes. "Did you inform your daughter of this specific withdrawal?" A pause. "I spoke to her about our situation, yes." "Did you inform her before making this specific withdrawal?" Another pause, longer. "I don't recall exactly." The bank records indicate this withdrawal was made on October 14th. Your phone records show your next call to your daughter was on October 19th, 5 days after the withdrawal. Is that consistent with informing her before? Gerald Fitch said objection in a voice that suggested he was objecting out of professional obligation rather than genuine hope. Judge Holloway said, "Overruled. Answer the question." Linda Chen looked at her hands. "No," she said very quietly. "No," Claire Sato repeated, also quietly. "Thank you. Let's look at the next one." They did this 17 times. 17 withdrawals, 17 variations of the same question, 17 quiet no's, or "I don't recalls," or silences that amounted to the same thing.
By the 12th, Linda Chen was crying. By the 15th, several people in the gallery were crying. By the 17th, Claire Sato set down her papers and said, "No further questions," and walked back to her table, and the courtroom was so quiet that you could hear the ventilation system. Maya took the stand on the 3rd day. She had not expected to be nervous. She was an engineer. She dealt in facts. The facts in this case were not in dispute. Even the defense had not seriously contested the bank records. What was in dispute was the meaning of the facts, the context, the intent. And Maya had lived inside that context for 20 years. She knew its dimensions exactly.
She sat in the witness chair and looked at the courtroom and thought, "This is the span. Calculate the load." Claire Sato walked her through the facts methodically, the scholarship, the account, the withdrawals, the discovery, the forged document. Maya answered each question in the same even tone she used when presenting engineering reports to city planning committees. Clear, precise, no embellishment. Then Claire Sato asked the question she had been leading to. "Miss Chen," she said, "you filed this lawsuit 20 years after the events in question began. Why now? Why not earlier?" The courtroom went very still. Maya looked at her attorney. Then she looked at the judge. Then, despite herself, despite every calculation she had made about this moment, she looked at her mother. Her mother was looking back at her. And her face was, God, her face was the face Maya remembered from childhood, the face that said, "My treasure," the face above the garden beds, the face at the kitchen table with the orange juice and the bridge drawings, the face that had said, "You're going to do great things," in the darkness of her bedroom on the night before she left for MIT. Maya looked away. "Because," she said. She stopped. Tried again. "Because I kept waiting for her to tell the truth." The silence in the courtroom was total. "I kept waiting," Maya continued, her voice very steady, "for her to call me and say, 'Maya, I took your money. I know I took it. I know what it cost you. I know that you worked 2 jobs in college because of what I took. I know that you didn't take a year abroad your junior year because you couldn't afford it. I know that you graduated with almost nothing in savings because I took what you should have had.' I kept waiting for her to say those words, not because I wanted the money back, although I did want the money back, but because I needed to know that what happened was real, that I wasn't imagining it, that someone else, she, could say it out loud."
She paused. "She never did," Maya said. "And I thought, maybe if I came here, maybe if there was a judge and a record and a room full of people, maybe here she would finally say it." Judge Holloway had stopped writing. Denny Vasquez had stopped writing. Claire Sato was looking at her client with an expression that was carefully neutral but involved the faintest possible softening around the eyes. "And has she?" Claire Sato asked. "Has your mother said those words?" "No," Maya said, "but at least now there's a record that I asked." Gerald Fitch's redirect was brief and genuinely painful to watch in the way that losing gracefully is painful. He asked Maya about her mother's financial difficulties after David Chen's death. Yes, they were real. He asked about the conversations between them. Yes, they had spoken. He asked whether Linda had ever expressed remorse. Yes, she had, in her way, her particular, carefully bounded way. He sat down. Judge Holloway called a recess. In the hallway outside Courtroom 14 during the recess, something happened that was not part of the official record and that Denny Vasquez witnessed because he had gone to get coffee from the vending machine at exactly the right or wrong moment. Maya Chen was standing near the window at the end of the hallway, looking out at the parking garage, which was not beautiful, but was at least outside. Linda Chen came down the hallway alone. Gerald Fitch was on the phone, gesticulating, moving with the careful step of someone who was not entirely sure of the ground under her feet. She stopped a few feet from her daughter. Maya didn't turn. Linda said, "I kept the box." Maya went very still. "The box with your drawings, your father's box. I kept it. I've kept it all these years. It's under my bed."
A long pause. "I don't know why I'm telling you that. I just wanted you to know." She went back the way she came. Maya stood at the window for a moment. Then she straightened her jacket and walked back toward the courtroom. Denny Vasquez pressed himself against the wall and pretended to study the vending machine options very carefully and thought, not for the first time, I am in the wrong line of work.
Part 4. The Verdict and What It Couldn't Fix. Judge Patricia Holloway delivered her ruling 4 days after closing arguments. She had, her clerk noted, rewritten her summary 3 times, unusual for a civil case with such clear documentary evidence. The ruling itself was legally straightforward. The law did not require soul-searching. The law required facts and precedent and an application of same. But Judge Holloway believed, after 19 years on the bench, that a ruling without context was a verdict without meaning, and this case had more context than most. She ruled in favor of the plaintiff. She awarded Maya Chen $31,400 in actual damages, the full amount of the misappropriated scholarship funds. She awarded $14,600 in additional damages, representing lost opportunity costs calculated over the period of the misappropriation. The year abroad Maya had been unable to afford, the professional development courses she hadn't taken, the savings gap that had taken her years longer to close than her peers. Total, $46,000. She ruled that the forged support agreement was legally void and that Maya Chen had no obligation under it. She ruled that all current state assistance arrangements for Linda Chen were to be reviewed and restructured without reference to Maya's financial capacity. And then Judge Holloway did something unusual. She looked up from her notes, over the top of her glasses, at both women, plaintiff and defendant, daughter and mother, 2 people who loved each other so badly they had done this, and she said, in a voice that was still precise but had lost some of its courtroom formality, "This ruling addresses what the law can address, which is the money. I want to be clear that this court recognizes that money is not what this case has ever been about, and no ruling I make today will resolve the deeper matter at issue. I say this not to diminish the plaintiff's legal victory, which is complete and warranted, but to acknowledge that some debts cannot be discharged in court. I hope, and I recognize this is outside my authority, that both parties find a way to address those debts in a room without lawyers." She looked at them for one more moment. Then she looked down at her notes. "Court is adjourned." The gallery took a moment to find its voice. Denny Vasquez, who had been in family court for 11 years and seen things, sat for the full 30 seconds before he wrote anything in his notebook, which was unprecedented. Then he wrote, "She was right. They both were." He looked at this sentence for a while. Then he crossed it out, because he didn't know what to do with it, and neither did anyone else. Fran, beside him, had eaten all 4 of her cookies by noon. She was on her phone now, ordering more. Outside the courthouse, on the steps, in the late afternoon light that was the particular gold color of California October, stood Maya Chen with Claire Sato and James Kirby, who had come for the ruling, who had taken the day off to be there, who was holding Maya's jacket because she'd handed it to him without thinking and he'd taken it without question, which was, she thought, probably why she was going to marry him. She had not expected to feel the way she felt. She had expected relief.
She had expected not triumph exactly, but completion, the clean click of a mechanism finally resolving. She felt, instead, like she was standing at the end of a very long bridge, looking back at where she'd started, and the distance was much greater than she'd calculated, and she wasn't entirely sure the bridge had been worth building. "You okay?" James said. "I don't know yet," Maya said. He nodded. This was one of the things she most valued about him. He understood that "I don't know yet" was a complete answer. Claire Sato shook Maya's hand. "I'll have the enforcement paperwork filed by end of week. The judgment is clear. Collection should be straightforward." "Thank you," Maya said. "You did the hard part," she said. "Showing up for 20 years before you got here, that was the hard part." She got into a car and drove away. Maya stood on the steps. James stood beside her. The October light was very gold. After a while, Maya said, "She kept the box." "What box?" Maya told him about the hallway, the drawings, her father's careful handwriting, Maya's bridges. James was quiet for a moment. "What does that mean to you?" he asked. Maya thought about it for a long time. "I don't know," she said. "I think it means that she loved me, genuinely. And I think that she also stole from me, genuinely. And I think—" She stopped. "I think I spent 20 years believing that those two things couldn't both be true at the same time. That if she loved me, she couldn't have taken from me, or if she took from me, the love must not have been real." She looked out at the parking garage, the same one she'd been staring at through the hallway window. "But that's not how people work," she said. "People contain both things. They can love you and fail you at the same time. The love doesn't cancel the failure. The failure doesn't cancel the love. They just," she spread her hands, "coexist. And you have to figure out what to do with a person who contains both of those things." James was quiet. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I don't know yet," she said. He handed her the jacket.
Epilogue. What remains? 3 months after the ruling, Maya Chen drove to Sacramento for the first time in 6 years. She did not call ahead. She parked on Peachtree Lane in front of the 2-story house and sat in her car for 20 minutes looking at the garden, the tomato plants, which were dormant now, brown stems waiting for spring. The house needed paint. The walkway had a crack running up the center that the roots of the old oak tree were slowly widening. She saw these things automatically, like an engineer sees structural failures, not as criticism, but as fact. She got out of the car. She knocked on the door. There was a long pause, longer than it should have been for a woman who didn't get many visitors. Then Linda Chen opened the door and looked at her daughter. She looked smaller than Maya remembered, not in height, but in some other dimension that age or illness sometimes reduces. Her eyes, though, were the same sharp, complicated eyes that Maya had inherited and used in conference rooms and courtrooms and across 19 years of careful, managed distance. "Maya," she said. "Hi, Mom." A pause. "You should have called," Linda said. "I know," Maya said. "Can I come in?" Linda stepped back from the door. The house smelled the same, garlic and dried herbs and something deeper, older, the specific olfactory code of a childhood home that the body carries forever in its memory, regardless of what the mind decides about it. Maya's body, regardless of everything, felt something loosen in her chest. The living room was tidier than she'd expected. Linda, she was learning, moved through good days and bad days in an irregular pattern, and this appeared to be a good day.
There were flowers on the side table, grocery store carnations in a glass jar. There was a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, a photograph of a mountain Maya didn't recognize. "I made tea," Linda said, as if she'd been expecting company all along. "Okay," Maya said. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where Maya had done her homework, where David Chen had eaten his quiet dinners, where the scholarship letter had sat in its envelope in April of a year that felt like it belonged to different people. Linda poured the tea. Maya wrapped her hands around the mug. She had rehearsed this. She had made notes, which she had then thrown away, and then made again and thrown away again, and finally decided that the only way to do this was to say what was true and trust that truth was enough. "I'm not here to make peace," Maya said. Linda looked at her. "I'm not ready for that," Maya said, "and I don't want to pretend I am, because I've spent a long time pretending, and I'm done with that. But I'm also," she stopped, "I'm also your daughter, and you're not well, and those two things are both true, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with both of them." Linda Chen looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she got up from the table. She went to the hallway and came back carrying a cardboard box worn at the corners, labeled in handwriting that was not hers, small, careful, the handwriting of a man who repaired watches and kept time and been gone for 22 years. Maya's Bridges. She set it on the table between them. "Your father would have been so proud," Linda said. Her voice cracked on the last word, just slightly, like a load-bearing element under pressure. Maya looked at the box. She thought about bridges, about what it means to build a thing that has to hold weight, that has to span a gap between two places that cannot otherwise reach each other, that has to be strong enough to carry not just its own weight, but the weight of everything that crosses it. She thought about the boy at the heart of an old film she'd watched once, standing at the bow of a ship, shouting, "I'm the king of the world." No, that wasn't right. This was a different story. She thought about her father's hands, the steadiest in any room. She thought about Priya Sharma, who had put down her quantum physics textbook. She thought about James Kirby's coffee, and Judge Holloway's glasses, and Claire Sato's precise surgical language, and Denny Vasquez pressed against the vending machine in the hallway. She thought about $31,000, and 17 withdrawals, and 20 years of silence, and a violet dress worn for a reason that the courtroom never asked about. The reason, violet, was the color Linda Chen always wore on Maya's birthday. She had wanted, on the day she finally told the truth, to be wearing her mother's color. She hadn't understood why until right now. "I know he would," Maya said. She reached across the table. She opened the box. The drawings were all there, every single one, from age 6 to age 17, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves that Linda had added at some point, protecting them against age and moisture. The bridge with the 6-year-old's careful towers, the increasingly sophisticated structures of middle school, the graduate-level designs of her senior year, and at the very bottom, wrapped separately in tissue paper, a note in David Chen's watchmaker's handwriting. "For Maya, who knows how to build things that hold." Maya sat with this for a long time. Linda sat across from her and did not say anything, which was perhaps the most honest thing she had ever done. Outside, the tomato plants waited for spring. The crack in the walkway expanded imperceptibly by another fraction of a millimeter. The oak tree kept growing. Maya Chen did not forgive her mother that day. She wants you to understand that, She's not telling a story about forgiveness because she doesn't think forgiveness is the right word for what she's working towards. Forgiveness implies absolution, a settling of accounts, a zeroing out, a fresh page. And she's an engineer. She knows that you cannot simply zero out structural damage. You can repair it, you can reinforce it, you can rebuild around it, but the damage is always there, in the record, in the material, in the calculation of what the structure can bear. What she is working towards, she thinks, is something more like understanding. Not excusing, not erasing. Understanding. The specific, difficult, necessary work of holding a complex truth in both hands without flinching from either side of it. Her mother loved her. Her mother failed her. Both things are true. Her mother is ill and alone and afraid. Her mother stole from her and lied about it and forged her name. All of these things are true. She is Linda Chen's daughter, and she's the plaintiff in Chen versus Chen, and she's an engineer who builds bridges, and she's a woman in her 30s who is going to marry a man who makes excellent coffee. And all of these things are simultaneously, uncomplicatedly, exhaustingly true. She visits her mother twice a month now. She does not stay overnight. She calls a care coordinator to check on Linda's medical situation, and she made sure the state assistance review resulted in proper support, and she has hired a part-time homemaid who comes 3 days a week, the cost of which comes out of the judgment funds Linda is repaying in monthly installments. She did not do this to be generous. She did it because it was necessary. She's trying to be honest about that. The bridge in Colorado, the pedestrian suspension bridge that won the Regional Engineering Award 6 months after the ruling, crosses a river that runs very fast in spring, fed from snowmelt from the mountains above, and very quiet in fall. When you can stand on the bridge and hear the water moving below and feel through the soles of your feet the infinitesimal vibration of the structure doing its work, holding the tension, distributing the load, spanning the gap between two sides that could not otherwise meet. Maya drove out to see it last fall. She stood in the middle for a while, looking at the water. Then she took her phone and took a photograph. Not for anyone else, not for social media or professional documentation or any purpose except this. She wanted to have it. She wanted to be able to look at it and remember that she had built this, that she had calculated the angles and the tolerances and the load distributions and put it all down on paper and handed it to builders and said, "This will hold." And it had held and was holding still and would continue to hold long after she was done thinking about all the things she was still working through. The photograph is the lock screen on her phone. Every time she picks it up, she sees the bridge. This is the kind of reminder she needs. Denny Vasquez published a piece about
when a parent takes something from a child, money, time, opportunity, the clean future they were owed, and the child grows up and finds the courage to say so. What do we owe the truth teller? Not in law, in the other currencies of human life, which are harder to count and cannot be ordered by a judge. What do we owe the person who finally stood up in a room full of people and said, "This happened, and I need someone to hear it"? He got more email about that piece than anything he'd written in 11 years. Most of it was from people who wanted to tell him their own version of the same story. He was not surprised. These stories are everywhere. They are in every family that has ever confused love with ownership, need with permission, silence with consent. They are in every adult child who has sat across from a parent in a kitchen or a courtroom or a garden and tried to hold both truths at once. You loved me and you hurt me, without letting go of either. They are hard stories. They do not resolve cleanly. They do not end with a verdict and a walk into the sunset. But they are worth telling, because the truth, even the complicated truth, even the truth that does not make anyone look entirely good, is the only material strong enough to build on. Ask any engineer. On the day Maya Chen drove back to Boston from Sacramento, she stopped at a hardware store in the Central Valley and bought a new cardboard box, sturdy, double-walled, the kind that holds its shape. She transferred the bridge drawings into it carefully in their plastic sleeves. She relabeled it in her own handwriting, precise and steady, nothing like her father's, but recognizably descended from it. Maya's Bridges, ongoing. She put it in her back seat. She drove home. The bridge holds. It is still holding. The calculation was correct.
Thank you for watching the video. Please subscribe to the channel, like, comments, and share. See you again!